All right, welcome to DNTV.TV. Today is the big report. What to do with your Chinese premiums, what to do with your numerics, what to do with your L's and your N's and your L's.com and your N's.org and your LLN's everything. We probably haven't had a bubble like this since maybe the Geo craze, the Geo plus service craze of 2004, 2005, or it also takes me back to maybe 2001, 2002, when companies like Fabulous were buying up tens of thousands of domain names with different combinations. And I think that I wanted to chime in with my thoughts on what's happening now, what you should do about it. This may give some perspective to some of you that are wondering what's going on. Those of you that are in the market with big dollars probably know more than I do, but maybe I'll shine some light on a thought or a perspective that you're unaware of. And then at the end, I'll tell you what I think you should do if you're a new investor, if you don't have a stake in the game yet. So I think one of the things to think of is what we're talking about now is the church of what's working now. This was Jim Cramer's old favorite saying. Don't be looking for the next thing. Don't be looking for the last thing. Look for the church of what's working now. And what is working now is incredible growth in values and incredible liquidity, which we're not used to in the domain business. We're not used to knowing that our assets can be sold tomorrow for a certain amount of money. And whether we're talking about anything from 2 letters all the way up to 5 letters and even more, or whether we're talking about 2 numbers all the way up to 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 numbers, we have this idea that there's Chinese end user demand for these types of domain names. That more importantly, there's Chinese investor demand to just buy these domain names, just own them, not do anything with them potentially, but just to have them and own them for the future. We have legacy global investors that have owned some of the best of these names for years. And I think in a diversified portfolio, the same people, the Mike Birkins, the Rick Schwartz, the Buy Domains, the Marchex portfolio at GoDaddy, all those people are benefiting from having a diversified portfolio of either the best, the medium, the pseudo best, whatever level you're at. Everyone has seen their names in these categories go up in value. And then at the same point, we have this huge group of people, especially U.S. domain investors, that have always been looking for the next big score. Just like in new TLDs, when's my chance to make my mark, to say that I was the first one into something? This is my time. This is my time to buy by the acre and sell by the foot, which has always been my favorite thing to try to do in domain name investing, where you could buy names in bulk for $10 to $20 to $30 and then sell each one of them as it was a prime piece of property at 100, 1,000, or even more. And we're talking about real money, real big money. 4 number domains have gone to the hundreds of thousands from the tens of thousands. LLLL.com names are approaching 1 million. 3-letter domain names have gone from 8 to 10 to 12 to 15 to 20 to 30 to maybe 50 if you're Chinese premiums. And maybe we'll see 100,000 wholesale. And I think these marks like 1,000 and 10,000 and 100,000 are very valuable marks. In the stock market, it's called par. It's called $100 stock, where stock is kind of drawn to that magic number to try to get there. We've also seen the 4letter.com market grow exponentially because there's so many of them. It's easy to get into and it's a relatively attractive price point. Then, after seeing 5 numbers get popular, we saw all the 6 numbers that had any sense of value gone, maybe even 7 numbers, plus 3 numbers in other TLDs. For instance, 4 numbers in .net are all gone and all get a bid. So it's real money being made. There seems to be real sales. We have better reporting tools than ever before to see instantly what's going on in the market. So why is this happening? It's got to get back to the fact that China is the largest market on the planet, the largest consumer market, the largest business market, the largest middle class, the largest amount of money that's being repurposed into new investments. Some of their other legacy investments in bank loans and real estate may not be working out. Their stock market had a huge plunge, and people like the idea of maybe owning something individual that could still give them a huge return. I think that the internet and internet assets still seem to have some idea that they're outside of government control. And I say kind of because, as we saw in the recent XYZ announcement, there are some government controls that registries have to play underneath. But central to the whole thing is that numbers and sometimes letters are easy to use and communicate, especially on mobile phones, especially on smartphones, which is where the dominant growth is happening on the internet worldwide. Keyboards were a problem. Chinese internet users had to choose between an ASCII character set to the left of the dot and the right of the dot. Then they were offered IDNs where they could have an IDN inside of an ASCII character set. Then you could get the ASCII new TLDs. Then you could get the new IDNs with ASCII characters or IDNs with new IDN TLDs. So you had situations where for the best words, the top words, you still had 7 to 8 variations, hard to understand, and people were on their cell phones all the time. There was enough legacy demand in 2- and 3-letter domain names that they were absolutely worth money and could be liquidly traded worldwide to establish a floor value that we've seen gone up from there. And I think there is some aspect of the fact that a domain name is an easy asset to trade around the world globally. So you can own it potentially in China and then sell that asset or use that asset worldwide in a way that could benefit you worldwide outside of China and maybe outside of some of their monetary controls. I've never lived in a country that had monetary control, so I don't know if this is real. I don't know if things are tracked so well that it is or isn't, or it's just an illusion that U.S. investors have come up with. But I believe it's central to the attractiveness of the large $100,000 to $1 million domain names. All right, why? Part 2. I still think domain names are still cheap to the power that they convey. That you can own and operate a website that can allow you to sell thousands or tens of thousands or millions of dollars to consumers worldwide and have your own direct connection to the internet that costs you $8 to $10 per year of renewal fees. That's still amazing. Other assets that have been bid up to 100% of their true market value, or maybe 200% because of the worldwide cheap money. We're still talking about domain names that have a huge gap between their potential market value and their current traded market value in a wholesale marketplace. I think being ownable is still a unique concept, especially for those in other countries where the government has owned everything. Short names are easy to remember. This is central, that you can convey your internet website quickly in a short attention span world, short domain names. Whether we're talking about this current rage or bubble in short names or not, I think the one thing that we've learned now is short is better. There's also effective marketplaces, whether it's NameJet and their ability to provide expired inventory as well as really valuable inventory that's been put up by some large owners of these short domain names. It takes demand. It takes more than one asset being sold. And I think that's what we've seen. And NameJet and GoDaddy and the other marketplaces like 4.cn have given people places to see what's happening. I'll put in here also more effective reporting. We can find out what happened yesterday through NameBio, even better than we used to have to wait a week to get Ron Jackson's DN Journal report. I think Ron's report still provides perspective, and I think looking at these things over time is very important. But to know what happened yesterday, to know what other people are paying, and the tremendous information available through the public has really fueled this market. I also don't know if there's a registrar subsidy effect. We used to have the 99-cent GoDaddy coupons that made it very easy to make a buy or no buy decision. And what I don't know is whether some of the buying in China is coming at a full retail price that we perceive to be, $10 to $15, or whether it's at the low cost price of maybe $8.50, or whether there's the equivalent deals over there. And lastly, I think we have the upside of a bubble, which is a self-fulfilling prophecy, meaning as more people pay higher amounts for the assets, then they look like they're all going up in value, which brings in more money, which brings in new people that pay more, which makes them look like they're going up, which brings in more money, and people pay more, and they look like they're going up. Because people are frozen with fear of selling too early, or long-term holders don't know if this is the top, you have restricted supply, new demand, low prices, at least for now, if you listen to the people that are really bullish. That gives you lots of activity, lots of cases where names are going up in value daily, if not weekly or monthly. So one of the things I've focused on as I've studied this for the past 3 or 4 weeks is I think there's 3 types of investors, or 3 ways to play this type of market. I think that there is the idea of what I used to call the algae cleaners, meaning they, like the movie Finding Nemo, they kind of go around the aquarium and they kind of, they kind of clean up the trash, you know what I mean, and keep things in order. And I think that what we have here is, because it's so new, that all of a sudden these numbers and these letters and these short domain names have value. Most people are simply trying to buy and find these domains below the wholesale floor, buy them for less than they think that they're worth, and not just worth over time, or not just worth as a percentage of a future retail sale, but worth less than what you could turn around and flip them for today. And I think that that's the activity that people see as a sure thing, meaning I can put a wanted post on a forum, say that I'll buy a 3-letter domain name for $10,000, and know that if I get one, it's worth $25,000 or $40,000 that same day. We also have cross-border or cross-marketplace arbitrage. What if investors in a certain marketplace aren't aware of the higher prices being paid by investors at another marketplace? And if you are, then you have the ability to buy with no fear of loss, knowing that you've probably got that domain sold to another broker or investor. In many cases, new investors to the market, I think potentially new investors in China, may not be aware of all the places to buy domain names. If you've watched some of our videos, or if you've watched our informational videos, there's a lot of places to buy domain names. Most of them, we have to assume, are being watched by smart domain investors. But there's still some out there that might not be. So the first way that people are making money are simply finding gems, finding assets that have a wholesale floor value, buying them for cheaper, and making money right away, whether they flip it or simply feel like they have an implied profit. Second set of people buying are people that are buying these assets because they think they can pay the current wholesale or just above, because you have to outbid someone to get the name. And then you feel like it's a no-lose proposition. You feel like other investors would have paid just a little bit less for the 4-letter that you bought. You might have paid $1,200, and there was at least one other bidder who would have paid $1,180. So you only feel like you outbid someone by $20. You can sell it back to that person at any time. So you feel like you have a no-lose proposition on the downside, and a chance for a big pop if it ends up that your letters or your numbers also mean I want to buy you a great present, or let's go to dinner, or let's date, or something like that in Chinese. Or it sounds like something that means that. And so the idea that you can buy something and have liquidity where we don't really have a lot of liquidity in the domain market, plus feel like you can get the pop, is an amazingly attractive proposition. And I think this is what's drawing most of the money in the expired name auctions, the deleted name auctions, the forums, and the marketplaces, is the idea that you feel good when you buy a name that has a floor underneath it because other people want it also. Lastly, we have people that are just saying, hey, this whole trend is just at the beginning. You got to pay up to get on board, whether you're buying the newest trend, the newest TLD where 4-number.cos or 5-letter.infos or something, haven't been all purchased, so you go buy all those at reg fee, or whether you're paying up, you're paying $100,000 for a 3-number domain name, or you're paying $10,000 for a group of 5 or 6 or 7 5-number.com domain names. You just have to get in the game. You just have to get in the name at some value, pay up to get on board, and wait for the trend to kick in. So now I'm going to talk about these 3 things. The people out there buying below the wholesale floor, you're hoping just to buy $1 for 50 cents. You're probably playing the auctions and the drop and the expired name marketplace. The sense here, I've always said that the motivation of the seller is very important in the price you pay for a domain name. And since in an expired name auction, the seller is not at the table, the auction service is happily looking to sell that name for whatever the market value is to get their share of the money, which is almost 100%. And then you have a sense of a free grab in that you're buying it and no other domainer is benefiting. There's no one else on the other side, like in a used car transaction, going, well, I really can't sell this name for this much, but I want this much. And then the subject of whether you're, quote, winning or losing kicks in. That if someone else wants to sell this domain for this value and they want to make the money, then it certainly can't be a good deal. But I think in the auctions and the drop and the expired auctions, you feel like there's no other person making that deal. It's just between you and a bunch of other buyers. You're just having to pay more than some other buyer. And so people seem to be more comfortable paying up and in many cases paying more money than they would if it was a third-party auction. This is also true of reserve auctions. Once you see the reserve, you think, well, this isn't a true market value option. Someone else has already come in there and said, I only want to sell it if I can get this price. And it causes some doubt or fear. Now, if you know what you're doing, you know what the values are, you think you have a good idea of what you're willing to spend, you see getting a low price as a great benefit. You're like, wow, I really thought this domain would go to $1,000 and I got it for $700. Now, if you're fearful or doubtful, not sure of what you're doing, and only buying because you thought other people wanted it, you get scared when you see someone only bid $700 for a name that you thought was surely worth $1,000. And all of a sudden, you're the high bidder, and no one's bidding against you, and you start thinking, oh my gosh, I've bid too much. And I think that's the difference between knowing what you want to pay for stuff going in and always being affected by what other people think. Now, lastly, if you don't speak Chinese, you have to use the fact that there's lots of other bidders to somehow indicate that the name has value in China, and then you just outbid them. But you don't know why you outbid them. You simply showed up at an auction, saw a bunch of activity, saw a bunch of people crowded around a certain item, and you walked in because you had the money and said, I'll pay up. I'll pay you $10 more than anyone else, and you got it, and then you have to almost wonder what you have. But at least you have the comfortableness of knowing other people wanted it too. So again, you have the seller not at the table, a sense of free grab from auctions and expired name auctions versus forums and third parties. You have to ask yourself, why are they selling? Your convictions are tested. You have to pay up to get in. You have to pay higher than market value to get a domain name on board. So you're actually telling yourself that you're willing to accept a current loss, knowing that just like a new car, when you drive it off the lot, when you go to sell it, you're not going to be able to get full value. You've got to pay up to get an asset on board. So that brings us to the great domainer's dilemma. I found this to be true over time. What you can buy, you don't want. Because if I could buy it and no one else wanted it, why do I want it? And what I want, what I really want to get, I can't buy because it's always too expensive. It's in a reserve auction that doesn't meet reserve. It's never for sale. Even if it's on a thread, the guy never delivers the domain name. So in a perfect market, you always have to pay up and incur a loss versus paying above market value to gain assets. But we all believe our market isn't perfect. We all believe that I'm buying or you're buying in places where you can get stuff for below its true value. So we then look at the domainer's dilemma and we say it doesn't apply to me. And you just have to be careful when you suspend disbelief in that way that you're not simply saying, I don't want it to apply to me. All right, second group of people are buying domains and waiting for the end user. You're buying the domain name, you're waiting for a hit, you're telling yourself that you're a long-term investor, that you're going to invest for 3 to 4 years and wait for an end user that either has the initials of their company slogan or their company name the same as your four-letter, and you're willing to wait over time. Now, the good thing is it's really cheap to wait. You pay $1,000 for a four-letter.com. You only have to pay $8 a year. You may have a chance to make 5, 10, or 20,000. I can wait. But I think a lot of people say they're going to wait 3 to 4 years, but in reality, they're hoping to sell it next month. And when they don't, they start wondering, should they go into the wholesale market and get rid of it? So my best encouragement is if you make this plan, stick to it. Stick to it because your renewal cost over time aren't that high. Make sure you've spent investable money that you're not, needing to liquidate in the next 2 to 3 months, and buy and wait and see if this thing plays out. If it's true that millions of end users in China will want these number and letter domain names, it's going to take a while for them to slowly discover, find, and buy any short name, much less your short name. So the most important thing here is, why did you buy your name? Do you know why your name is valuable? I believe it can be valuable 3 different ways. It can be scarce and investment grade. It can have a value simply because all other names of its same size are taken and are selling for a certain amount. So this is true of letters, numbers, now numbers, 5number.coms and things like that. But if you're out in the 6, 7, and 8 number domain names, and if you're out in the 5 number domain names, I think you really have to understand why your name might be valuable. Is it because of the premium quality of the letters you have? Is it because of the pattern of the letters or numbers that you have? Or is it because the letters and numbers that you have sound like either a cool, sexy, brandable word, or a phrase that's commonly used or might be commonly used? So, if you're buying 2 to 3 to 4 numbers and letters, you want to stay abreast of the marketplace, know what you're paying, but you also want to discover whether your name means something in Chinese, whether the letters or numbers or the pronunciations mean something, or you want to understand that you've bought an attractive rhythm, an attractive sounding name. This would be similar to, in English, having a name Go-Go Dancer, because it's like go-go. That sounds really cool. It just sounds neat. And then dancer at the end. And so you have to ask yourself, does my name sound that way? Does it sound cool? Does it sound attractive to these Chinese investors? Now, most of the time in the U.S., when you buy a domain name, either a one-word premium or a category killer or a geo combo, you can do end-user marketing. It's unclear, besides simply looking at who owns your name and other extensions, whether you can really figure out who would most likely want that name in China. Maybe using a Chinese broker would help. But I think in this case, you're hoping someone comes along and wants what you have. I will say that we all get spammed every day by people who have domain names and want us to buy them, and we get all the emails because we also own a bunch of domain names, and someone sends us a spam email with one of the names we own with a dash, or misspelled, or with extra words. Now, can you imagine the spam next year if people try to sell right before renewal a number that has 2 6s and a 7 in it, and they decide to send out emails to every other person who owns a domain name with something similar to the numbers that they own? Or if every 7-number domain name person thinks that every other 7-number domain name person is a likely candidate for their name. Anyway, that's going to be a lot of spam emails. All right. Now, a lot of people are saying just get in. You're selling names in other areas. We have strong end user sales still in the U.S. of small business names, and you just want to buy. You see it as a self-fulfilling prophecy that's going to keep going, even though you're in the middle of the game. You don't think it's the end of the game. One of the reasons that makes this seem like it's the most likely scenario is that we have new money coming in, and we have reluctant sellers. So at the same time that supply is constricted because people who just bought or have owned them for a long time are waiting for the top of the market, we also have new money coming in uninformed, looking to buy whatever it can get. The interesting thing about domain names is we all have a 1-year look at our name when we buy it. This applies to mostly the free registrations that are happening, what I call free registration, meaning a registration of an available name. It's not clear whether you're going to renew that name in a year, but it looks like the name's off the market now, and the perception is then that it's held by a strong holder, that it's always going to be off the market. But we really don't know that. If you truly look at the deleted name inventory and the percentage of names that are only held for 1 year, even in some of these areas that we're discussing as being super popular right now, it will show you that a lot of people are buying these things and are going to be one and done holders. There's massive 1-year holds right now for domain names that don't seem to make any sense. One example would be names that have words in them or letters that have no sense or no likely combination with 88 at the end, which seems to be a valuable suffix for Chinese domain names. There's over 3,500 of these that have dropped in the past month that don't make sense to me or anyone else, that can be as long as 15 or 16 letters, that were registered last year. And if you saw all these being registered, you might have dove in and bought a bunch also, only to realize that everyone who bought them dropped them. But the mentality here is that you can't lose, that it's where the money is. I'm going to put my money in. I'm going to commit my money to an e-liquid asset with an expectation that there's a liquid market. And that's great as long as there's a liquid market. Alrighty, we have to remember that a lot of the new investors from China or other countries haven't learned the lessons we learned. We learned a long time ago with exact match domain names that there aren't simply enough people in the US buying websites to buy millions of domain names, premium domain names, at above, say, $3,000. There's simply not enough. The law of large numbers comes into play. If someone feels like they can buy 30 to 50,000 7number.coms, because they're a domain investor, they buy them up quickly, and they think they might sell them in the course of the year before they have to expire. But that's a lot of people who have to come along and buy these names. And the more numbers inside of a domain name, when you get from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, you're talking about needing people to buy now 100,000 or 1,000,000 or 10 million domain names to be able to exhaust all the possibilities. Now, what's happening now isn't new. I think Shane at DomainChain.com has probably followed this market longer than anybody. He's seen the ebbs and flows. There have been times 6, 7, and 10 years ago when these domain names were seen as liquid, the cat's meow, what everyone wanted. And there's been times when they've been out of favor, and all of a sudden we saw them drop. I think 4letter.net is a great example of this, where at one time there was a sense that they might all be taken, and then slowly but surely they were dropped. And then once people saw they had no value, a bunch of them got dropped. And then all of a sudden in the last 4 months, they're all now valuable, and they made some of them extremely valuable. One of the things we have to remember is that when we buy a domain name, we think we're making an investment. We think we've paid $8 or $100 or $500 or $1,000. We tell ourselves that it's worth that. But once you start having to renew 50 or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 domain names, now it's an expense. If you bought 1,000 7number.coms, next year you're going to have to pay $8,000 in renewals. And if you've only sold a couple of them for $1,000 this year, you're going to have to recommit new money to invest to pay the renewals. The one thing that happens that convinces people that we're more likely in a bubble than anything else is that people are suspending reality. They're simply saying, I've got to get in, I've got to buy. At the same point, they tell themselves that it's only the dumb, stupid plotters who try to make sense of this market that are going to be left behind, and they've got to plunge in and buy. But I think that's only true if you were discovering this market based upon reading some blog posts back in 2011, 2012, 2013. And it would have taken a lot of courage to go in there and be the crazy guy who bought 1,000 of these things. But now you'd be up big. Do the crazy people who come in late and buy a bunch actually make money? And I think the trend needs to go on for a long time for that to happen. But I could be all wrong. Why am I even trying to make sense of this market? This is a new thing that's never happened before. There's billions of people in China. Even when they're done, there's billions of people on Earth. Plus, we're going to colonize Mars. They're going to need domain names. They're going to use numbers. These things, when we look back at this time, this is going to be seen as a time that's incredibly cheap. When you add in the Internet of Things, all these devices may not just need IP addresses, which are becoming scarce, but they might need domain names. There's thousands and millions of more investors that buy stocks and bonds and real estate that could come in and buy domain names. All the names are taken up by the big guys. So if that's what they're doing, then we got to get in, and I need to find my place so I can become a big guy. No one will sell. If no one's selling, then whatever I have, I'm the only one who's willing to sell, and the big guys aren't, so I'll be able to make money anytime I want. These numbers in China, at least the ones that are 5 numbers, might have been similar to phone numbers that people have used. Think how many phone numbers are enforced in the US. Think if every one of those people wanted a domain name. And then think, just because Chinese people play by one set of rules and want these names, what if the same thing happens in other nations, in India, in Indonesia, in Japan, which to date hasn't been a big buyer of domain names, in Africa, the new unexplored continent that could grow over the next 10 or 20 years. They're going to want short names. They're going to want number names. They're going to want names that transfer across all languages. This is the reason to buy, get whatever you can, pay whatever price it takes, get in, because all this may happen. But now I'll talk about some of the things that are real risk. And there's a word called cognitive dissonance, which is if you're reading this and you're listening to this and you simply say it can't happen, then I don't think you're appreciating the risk that it could, and you're just trying to blindly go in there and buy. I think you have to realize that some of these things could happen. You have to be willing to, I think, sell some names to make a profit on the way up and not just be risking everything for some time in the future. One of the risks is, can a government decree wipe out the value? We've seen XYZ have to agree to limit the sales of some names worldwide to be able to have their domains be active in China and allow Chinese owners of businesses to use their domain names. Did anyone even know that the registry had to be approved in China for a Chinese resident to be able to operate a website? Now, you may say that's okay. None of these investors are buying in because they're operating websites. They're buying in for speculative demand. But at the root core of any valuation has to be that someone wants this domain name as a website. Of course it's a bubble. We all know it's a bubble. But everyone says it's a bubble. But man, I want to make some money on it before it bursts. The other thing you have to remember is when the tide goes out, it's going to look much differently. If all of a sudden no one wants these domains, then no one's going to want these domains to sell to someone else who they thought wanted them, and no one's going to want to buy them for a wholesale price to sell them to a retail buyer that may not exist. So when the tide goes out, you really have to stand strong, keep to your convictions, hold your inventory, and hope it's not at the anniversary of a huge renewal bill. And this has happened before. We've seen times where these numbers and these letters, or really any theme in domaining, has been out of favor, and stuff gets dropped, and stuff is perceived to have no value, and stuff is hard to trade wholesale. So you may have a second chance to buy into this at the first hiccup. Some other new trend could come and replace numbers and letters. So just as fast as the new money said this is the only place to go, we could all of a sudden, someone could come out with a story that says hyphens are fantastic, and the more hyphens you have in a domain name, the better. And people could rush to buy every combination of 3 letters with 2 hyphens in between, or 2 letters with 5 hyphens in between, and we could have some new trend that all of a sudden that was the only thing that people wanted to buy, so you had to jump on board. Now again, I'm not saying that's likely. I'm saying that you have to be aware that if you're investing in a hot money area, sometimes your biggest risk is a new hot money trend. If you're in deep and if you're in high at the 2 and 3 and 4 letter, you've probably got enough moat or enough value in your buy to still wait and sell to an end user and make money. But if you're on the fringes, if you're in the other TLDs, buying what you can get, you have to realize you're more susceptible to a new trend and the hot money moving. So watch the money. We need millions of dollars to keep coming into this marketplace each week just to keep the current values. If you see the rate of growth become constant or decelerate, again, just because things are going up doesn't mean the market is still strong. If they're not going up, in my opinion, at a higher constant rate than what they were going up last week. Because again, you're not just buying domain names based upon their true value, like you can earn rent or you can go to the bank and cash them in. You're buying based upon speculative value. You need the rate of growth of that speculative value to be constantly higher and higher and higher to eat up the existing inventory, to eat up those people that are selling right now, which you may say, oh, that person's so dumb to be selling their four-letter.coms for $1,000. I can't believe they're doing that. But it's only when those domains are bought and purchased and that new money is spent on those domains that the market can go up for your domains to increase in value. The self-fulfilling prophecy works on the other end. If all of a sudden people say the bloom's off the rose of these short domain names, and again, I'm not talking about investment quality 2, 3, and 4 letters, although I think 2, 3, and 4 numbers, although their values and the maximum you might be able to get an auction may drop a little bit. I don't think they're going to go to zero, but you can clearly have some of these fringe areas go to zero. And if all of a sudden there's a thought that they're worth zero, there's no one wanting to buy them to wait and hold out that period. They're trying to get at them the fast as they can. And because more inventory was bought on the way up in the bubble, you could see domain name values drop to below what people think is a fair value because there's so much selling. Now, if everyone thinks this is going to happen, they just say it's going to happen in 2 or 3 or 5 years down the road. I also believe quality lasts and gets noticed. It gets distinguished, it separates. Have something in your portfolio that's the best in some area, that is a phrase that you know means something, that a lot of bidders wanted. Because I think you're going to want to have something of quality in your portfolio to hold on to represent the biggest part of your investment, as opposed to simply having 1,000 chips on the table at a roulette wheel, the wheel's spinning, and you hope the little ball drops into your number. I think it's good to have quality. I think right now, quality doesn't seem to matter. People are just buying every 5 number, every 6 number, every 7 number. And when you find yourself bidding up a domain name, you'll find that you're losing many bidders at each level. Every time a name goes up $100, there may only get to the point where there's 2 or 3 bidders. And I think that that's a better place to be than when you simply had 100 people that were willing to buy that name for below wholesale. One of the interesting things you have to do when you're playing in a fast growth market is in many cases you need to buy 2 domain names at a certain level. You need to buy 2 LLLL.coms or 2 number.coms because you're going to be tempted to sell one. And if you sell one and you don't have another one, your fear of not selling at the top of the market and thereby having to come back in and pay even more to get back in the market is going to paralyze you from taking action. So I think sometimes you want to buy 2 of something, 2 4 letters, 2 5 numbers, 2 6 numbers, or at least 2, so that you have some that you consider sellable so you can test whether that demand is really there. The only way to really test whether a name is liquid is to try to sell it. And once you sell it, it's going to confirm that it was liquid, and you're going to wish you still owned it. So sometimes buying 2 or more domain names is important. And lastly, don't forget that at this time when all the money is going to number, letter domain names, that other areas are probably becoming more attractively priced at the wholesale market. And if you talk about a stock concept called dollar cost averaging, what that means is that you're spending the same amount of money each week, but when the stock market goes down, you're actually buying more shares. So in this case, other areas like brandables or like geos or geo combos or exact match names aren't getting the bids that they would normally get because all the hot money is going to these number, and letters. But at the same point, if you say that over time, different asset classes are going to have their time in the sun, this is when you might want to be picking up some attractively priced inventory in other areas. Just like many people 2 years ago that were still buying premium four-letter.coms and four-letter.nets and five-number.nets, even though there wasn't a current hyper-growth market, now have attractively purchased investments. All right, let's talk about those of you that are still not in. What to do, and I've thought long and hard about making this video, and so I wanted to talk about what to do. What would be my advice to you? And my advice to you is buy something at the top and then be greedy at the bottom. So what I mean is, I think you're going to feel a need to get into this market, and you should. But I would not necessarily, first and foremost, look to see what you can get at reg fee. I would buy something of quality in an auction with a lot of bidders. Be patient a little bit. Pick the best auction over the next 3 to 4 days and get a four-letter, get a five-number, get something at your price point that you normally spend, whether it's $69, $150, $300, $1,000, $5,000. Because once you at least get something on board, you're not going to be so excited to buy something that you'll make a bad decision on a lesser quality name, and you won't feel like you're missing something if you don't buy. If you don't buy every available 8-number domain name with 3 8s in the middle and no 4s and no 6s, but 2 3s, but not enough 7s. So get some quality on board, scratch that itch, and feel the liquidity. Meaning when someone says on a board, hey, I want to buy a four-letter, and you've got one, and you say I want $8,000 for it, and they say, no, I might pay 2, at least you've got some confirmation that it's liquid. At the same point, if you sit there and you say, I'm going to put it on a domain name newsletter, I'm going to put it in a forum, I'm going to put it on auction, and it gets no bids, you now have information that no one else has. You know that maybe this market isn't as strong as everyone says it is. So you either want to feel that liquidity or illiquidity, not by deciphering name bio and what's happening to other people, but by actually owning something yourself. Plus, once you have something, you have more patience to outlast others. If you're bidding on expired names, you never know whether in a certain day or time of the week or time of the month or a certain, number pattern or something like that, there all of a sudden just wasn't that many bidders, and you happened to get something for a good value. You were disciplined, you knew the price point you wanted to pay, and what that means is you're only going to buy when you're going to be happy. Meaning you're only going to place a $69 bid on stuff that you would have willingly paid $300 or $400 for. So instead of getting your $69 bid, finding out that there was no other bidder, and being happy like you are if you knew that you would have paid up for it, a lot of people will put in a bid for $69, get the name, and then say, oh darn, I shouldn't have done that, no one else wanted it. So I think you have more patience to be a more disciplined buyer, or as I say, to be more greedy at the bottom and only buy the best if you have something on board. Stay informed. What an amazing vehicle the internet is, and what an amazing vehicle it is to get current, timely, and up-to-date information. Like this report, like the daily prices coming out of Name Bio and other places. Being able to see the live auctions at fourletterdomains.com. If there is one area that might have some opportunity, but again, don't go crazy, it's this idea that fours are terrible and so are vowels. I think it's a feast or famine strategy in that you could be absolutely wrong. Everyone else is totally right. No one wants names with fours and vowels. Or you could find out that some combinations aren't as bad as you think. The whole market is shunning them, and that's one place where you might be able to still get in for an attractive price. So that's my report on what to do. With letter domains, number domain names. What I want to do is I want to open it up to everybody to chat about this. And I'm going to have 2 live chats. One of them will be this Sunday night on blab.in. And you can get the link at dntv.tv. And whether you're a sophisticated investor, a new investor, what this is it's a 4-way video chat, almost like 4 video cameras on at the same time, much like a Google Hangout. But everybody can watch live in the chat room and submit questions. And then if you want to come on video and talk about it, or if you have something you really feel like you can offer to other investors and you wanted to share it, I'll let people that want to come on go ahead and come on live with their video connection. And again, that's going to be at blab.im. Search under domain names, and you should see our chat. Or follow the link at dntv.tv. So this is Paige Al. I hope this has been helpful for you. I need to say I don't have a big stake in these names. I'm probably underinvested, and the ones that I did have, I sold early. You might want to take that as, hey, why the heck listen to this guy? But I have tried to aggregate the information available, plus what I've learned over the past 10 to 12 years, to provide some perspective that I hope has been helpful for you watching DNTV. Thanks a lot.